Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 281 of the Canadian Football Countdown, a proud member of the Canadian Football Podcast Network and the Alternative Football Network. Ryan, Adam, and Trey here with you this evening. We got a busy episode for you. We have a lot to talk about. The CFL negotiation window has opened, and there's a lot of moves in principle already agreed to. Nothing official for most of them, at least, until free agency kicks off a week from today in the CFL. But they've got this new negotiation window this year, and you know what they say, the devil works hard, but Ed Hervey, a week before he can officially start negotiating deals, works harder. And that is the story of the week so far. We're going to try to get through as many of the news items as we can across this episode. But first, let's bring in the rest of the panel. Adam, how are you doing tonight?
Well, besides a little bit of a cold and, well, I could see why the cold, minus 25 with a wind chill of, oh my gosh, in Saskatchewan right now, probably would do that. No, just bracing for a good snowstorm coming up here. Feeding cows, keeping cows warm, working with cows, lots of cows.
Cows.
All about the cows right now. Yeah, that's pretty much my entire being at this moment. And also taking a phone call from Ed Hervey if I wanted to join the turf district. I don't know why. But, Trey, you get your call from Ed yet?
No, not yet. Not on that one. I got the call today saying that I didn't get the OC job in Winnipeg. That was about it. But no calls to go to Edmonton for me. But other than that, doing all right. Yeah, this cold can screw off. But other than that, very exciting week, boys. I think a lot of teams, a lot of movement, a lot of stuff going on. Some teams got better, some teams didn't get better, and yeah, we'll see. Man, really interesting. I was thinking about it. We'll talk about it maybe later today or next week, but how do you rank these preseason teams going right as of now? Like, I have no idea how to rank some of these teams, especially in the East. So very interesting. I know someone asked us last week for our off-season predictions or something, and man, we should have just did them last week. I think they would have been a lot easier to do. Now I don't know how to separate some of these teams.
I don't know if I can even, I don't know if I can pick between the teams. And I think what we saw so far this week and what we'll see officially starting next week is probably changing my predictions quite a bit from what I had before then. So the CFL, it's a fun time every year. Free agency is fun. This negotiation window is fun. And lots of fun ahead as 1 week from today, the free agency window opens, which means we'll plug it here off the top of the show. If I can find a view that works, there it is. CFL Free Agent Frenzy 2025 next Tuesday, February 11th. We will be live on our YouTube and Facebook pages, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Central Time in support of CFL Fans Fight Cancer. 8 straight hours of live coverage and analysis of everything you've heard over the last week, because who knows how much will actually be left by next Tuesday. But hey, every time you get some guys who change their minds at the last minute, maybe they'll go elsewhere where the next dominoes fall, and we have a lot to talk about. We've got a great lineup of guests. We have a guest coming in basically every half hour throughout the show, so lining up a lot of that. We'll get coverage for all 9 teams around the CFL as part of that as well, and some other fun guests along the way also. And again, it's all in support of CFL Fans Fight Cancer. So we hope you join us next Tuesday for 8 hours. And please, do what you can to help us spread the news. And let's do this all for a good cause this year and raise some money in the fight against cancer as a part of it. So stay tuned for that. Very excited for the annual event to be coming up again so soon. And then back to hibernation for me after that, after all the planning that goes into this every year. I feel like it's such a momentum builder. And then maybe we take a week or two off after that to recharge, and you can listen to the 8 hours on repeat. And then we come back and do more fun off-season shows. The off-season is a fun time, I find, in the podcast, because I already have so many off-season episodes lined up for after free agency of different things I want to talk about that we don't have as much time to talk about now because we have all of this news from around the league to discuss. A couple of the usual housekeeping things before we start diving into all of these transactions. The Canadian Football Countdown is brought to you by our presenting sponsor, Game Time TV. You can learn more at GameTimeTV.ca or Facebook.com/GameTimeTVMB. We are live this evening on our YouTube and Facebook and Twitch pages, so feel free to send in your comments and questions in the live chat, and we will try to loop those into the conversation throughout as well. We do want to acknowledge that the Canadian Football Countdown is brought to you from Treaty 1 territory, traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation, as well as from Treaty 4 territory, traditional territory of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and Métis Nation. And then finally, if you're looking for additional content on top of our weekly episodes, check out the CFC Discord. It's been booming this week with all of the news. Shout out to FM Fan in the Discord, by the way, who has just been on the pulse of taking every news item from around the CFL and sharing it in the channel there, and even went as far as to provide me a spreadsheet for tonight's episode to help gather all of the news in a nice, convenient place. So shout out to you, and thanks for helping us prep for tonight's show, because I did not have enough time to go and compile everything into one convenient location. Link is in the episode description. It's free to join us in the Discord and chat between episodes there. All right, let's dive into this week's news so far, but maybe let's start with your guys' thoughts. I like to ask this every year, and maybe it changes from year to year, on the negotiation window itself. Right, we're a couple days into it so far. Lots going on. Do you like how the CFL does this?
You want to go first, Drew?
Yeah, sure. I'll go with no. I don't mind the negotiation window. I think it should all be hush hush until Tuesday. And maybe I'm wrong, but I believe that's kind of what the other leagues are like, because I don't remember them too much. Basketball has it, and I remember the whole Kawhi Leonard, there we go. Couldn't think of his thing where he had that negotiation thing and we're tracking his airplane and this and that. Same with Ohtani. You know, it gets the suspense going, but I think that all this rumored stuff, like even if it's confirmed, I still think it's not confirmed because they can't really file it for a while, even if the teams maybe tweeted about it or not. My monitor's all messed up here. So I kind of don't like that. I would rather, sure, I don't mind the week, but don't really announce anything till Tuesday. I would rather, and maybe that's just me being selfish, so we have something to talk about next week as everything is taken off. But I think it just kind of ruins the suspense a little bit. So I would rather that. Adam?
You know what? I don't mind it. Actually, I kind of like it, to be honest, but I don't think it needs to be quite as long. 3 days is more than enough. Not a whole week of where this guy's going, where this guy's going, and where this guy's going. The other part also about this is we can't track airplanes in the CFL like in the NFL or in the HL, because you know what? Our players are all flying commercial. If you're just flying, doing commercial jets mostly, be weird to kind of follow it. But anyways, no, I think it should only be maybe 3 days. It'd be nice if it was quiet, but you know what? To be expected that it gets out there. Now, remember, any of these deals that we're going to be saying are agreement in principle or a deal made are technically not official until the day of. Even if, for example, Ed Hervey signs 15, 20 guys, says that he's got them, they still have the opportunity, the previous team, to match that and also try to retain the player until noon on the 11th. So there could be some players that say, you know what? My guy matched that. My GM that I'm with currently matched it. Maybe they'll stay. That being said, probably not going to happen. Who knows? But in all honesty, though, Ryan, I don't like it, but I like it in a way. So does that make sense?
Can I ask you for a clarification point on that? So let's say a player agrees in principle to a deal with Edmonton, as most of them have. You were mentioning, former team can send them another offer. They can choose to go back to them. Let's say a former Bomber goes to Edmonton or agrees with them. Can they then sign with Hamilton, with Ottawa, et cetera? Or is it now, if they agree in principle, is it officially down to either the team they signed with or back to the old team? Or they could go anywhere still?
So what happens is the day of free agency, that team has until noon, the originating team. So again, what I'll say is it like this: as let's say a Saskatchewan receiver gets a agreement in principle done with Edmonton. Okay, great. He can still go to other teams and shop around and see if he can get better or do whatever. But he at 9 a.m. that morning on free agency until noon, the original team, so Saskatchewan in this case, let's say, would have the exclusive rights to negotiate with him. After noon, he would be able to go to that team, or he would be able to go to Edmonton, let's say, or he can sign with anybody else he wants.
Oh, okay.
And he's officially a free agent. So it doesn't mean that he has to go to Edmonton that I know of. As far as I know,
that's my understanding as well. I just wasn't sure when you were talking through it before. So wanted to get that clarity out there at the start of this here. My thought on it is, I mean, it's disappointing when we plan an 8-hour show for the opening of free agency and all of the top free agents, we kind of know where they're probably going to go ahead of time, and most of the guys will go there. I know we did debate coming into this year, do we do 8 hours on free agency day? Do we do an hour a day throughout the negotiation window? Maybe next year it's 8 hours on the opening of the negotiation window is the right move, because Sunday when it opened was such a fun news day around the CFL. But I think the CFL kind of hit the nail on the head here with, we're talking about this league nonstop for an entire week plus in the middle of February. In the middle of the offseason, we're discussing it nonstop. And I mean, we have been throughout the offseason here on the podcast, but fans in general across social media and everything, the hype is there. And so maybe it's a good thing that they are doing it this way. But I don't know.
I mean, Super Bowl week, we're heading into the Four Nations Cup thing in NHL. You know, there's other things going on in other leagues. And yeah, you're right. CFL found a way to weasel its way in, which we always complain about it not being able to do.
To be honest, I forgot the Super Bowl was this weekend.
Yeah. Oh, man, once it was KC Philly again, I stopped caring. But
I think a lot of fans probably just decided not to care.
Yeah.
That's reasonable. Yeah, it's interesting. They tried to put this negotiation window in place because they called it, the Ed Hervey. We call it the Ed Hervey legal tampering window because historically, free agency opens at noon. 10 guys, deals signed by 12:05, and it's like there's physically no way you had time to talk to all of these players after the window opened to do so. Like, let's stop kidding ourselves. This is happening behind the scenes. So now the CFL is now putting it out more in the open by doing so, except that it didn't accomplish anything because 10 minutes into the negotiation window opening, Ed Hervey had like 7 guys signed to a contract. We're going to talk through all of those here yet. When we talk about the different ways to do it better, and you're saying, don't announce it, it's hard to not announce things because everything gets leaked through social media these days. I wonder if there's a way to make it more enticing where it gets publicly put out there, maybe which teams put in offers for each player, but they can't officially sign anything until later. Like, you can start having conversations and make them an offer, but they can't agree to anything in principle, because then we're spending this week and this day talking about, Kenny Lawler, he's going to go to these 3 teams. Eugene Lewis might go to one of these teams. And we're trying to piece all the puzzles together and then still have that fun opening day of free agency.
No, that's what I said about the whole Ohtani or Kawhi Leonard thing. Ohtani, it was all down to Dodgers and Jays and one other team, right? And that was all getting talked about. The only difference was there was no hard deadline on that. He could sign at any time. So that's what I was kind of saying. That's what I would like. Sure, have the window to talk. Just no handshake, no spit shake deals, no nothing official. Because again, how exciting would that be to know Lawler had 3 teams coming after him? 2 of those teams are also going after, Eugene Lewis. Yeah, that's something we could talk about today, tomorrow, and on Tuesday. And I think that would actually maybe drive the interest up more. Because now, I don't know, big chunk of the players are gone. What are we going to talk about the rest of the week? At least that way we had something to talk about if it wasn't all official, right?
Yeah, exactly. All right, we got lots of news to get into, so let's dive into it. We'll start with Edmonton. I think that's the logical place to start. And then we'll bounce around to different teams, and y'all can pick which team we go to next here. But the Elks, most active team on the opening of free agency. Not a huge surprise. New owner, new GM, correct? Yeah, new GM in place this year, new coach, really wanting to put a new president, wanting to put a stamp on their team. Active in free agency here. I'm going to start by listing off all of these names, and then we can talk about what you guys think. Wide receiver Kion Julian Grant, Canadian wide receiver that was with the Montreal Alouettes last year. On the offensive line, Brett Boyko, who they released a couple days earlier, re-signed to a 2-year contract. I guess he looked at other options, didn't like what he was getting, decided to come back. They bring in offensive lineman David Beard, who was with the Ticats, and offensive lineman Gregor McKellar from the Red Blacks. A lot of focus on the defensive line. Robbie Smith, Jake Serezna, Jared Brinkman, Jacob Lamunden re-signed there for a 1-year deal. But the 3 before that, all coming over from the Argos. Ali Fayad from the Bombers. They bring back Niles Morgan at linebacker, which you're thinking as they're signing all of these other guys that there's no way they're going to find the money to bring him back, but they get him back on a 2-year deal. And then at defensive back, Royce Metier from the Argos, Emmanuel Ragamba from the Lions, Kobe Williams from the Stamps, and then Tyrell Ford from the Bombers to a 2-year deal to join his brother Trey over in Edmonton. What do you guys think of everything Ed Hervey's done here, Adam?
This defense is going to be extremely scary in 2025. I mean, if it wasn't for Jake Serezna going there, that's a great defensive lineman, a national of all things. You got Tyrell Ford, the defensive back. I mean, he was incredible in Winnipeg last year. Niles Morgan was just a ridiculous linebacker last year. I think he was the rookie of the year, if I'm not mistaken. Or at least he had a pile of tackles that I can remember. I mean, everything on this just screams that this team is a contender for 2025. They've got the only thing I'll have a little bit of a question on is the receiving core, because you are losing a few pieces in there with Eugene Lewis. But you know what? This is a very dangerous team in defense. Royce Mechie, again, another one that we don't talk about very much, but boy, is he a good defensive back for the Edmonton Elks. I mean, this team here is very, very deep on defense. I guess Ed Hervey looked at it and said, we need to build their offense, we need to build their defensive lines. And again, I agree with him. You build in the trenches and you go for it. And boy, I like his signing so far. Boyko, we had him here in Saskatchewan, I believe, and I wasn't impressed. But David Beard is one of the best centers in the game right now. Edmonton, kudos to you guys, and start buying tickets because this is going to be fun to watch. Maybe it's going to just sit there and grind you down, and boy, I like it. Trey, what do you think of Edmonton?
Man, I'd have to say so far they're probably the most improved team on paper, even though they had those couple of subtractions like Eugene Lewis and Haggerty and a couple other things, and Purefoy, I guess, even before this. But man, the things they've added, like you said, that defense, they didn't add tons on offense. The offensive line, though, a couple veterans, or they re-got the Boyko, got Beard in, got the younger McKellar there. That's their nationals on the O-line for sure, and that's a very important part of any CFL team. Tyrell Ford, I think, might just be the biggest addition on that. Very man, I was hoping he just stayed in the NFL because I had a feeling he wasn't coming back to Winnipeg. So, but yeah, good to see that there. And from a marketing standpoint, there better be 1 million Ford jerseys with either Trey Ford or Tyrell Ford's number in the stands. And yeah, I mean, the West just got a little bit more sticky because, sheesh, Edmonton. They weren't bad for long, and we'll talk about some other teams, but Calgary looks a little better with VA, BC. Another year with Rourke. You never can count out Saskatchewan or Winnipeg, right? So, man, and then thinking about how good the East maybe got, there might only be 3 playoff spots available. And Edmonton's really making a big bid for it here. And I like it. I mean, I do want to see maybe a couple more additions on in the receiving core if possible.
Yeah,
So
that's what I'm wondering about too, is where they're going at receiver now. So if I look at the subtractions, and I add a new tab for that to our sheet that we're all looking at here, is Eugene Lewis is gone, Tevin Jones is gone, Hergy Mayal is a free agent, hasn't been signed yet. Gavin Cobb is gone, Kyron Moore, a free agent. They don't have a ton left. What they are good at is Canadian wide receiver depth. And they've got, they had Curly Gittins Jr., and now they add Kayan Julian Grant. So, that's going to be confusing with KJG and KGJ, both on the same offense if you go with the abbreviations. But
yeah. I mean, they already got 2 T Fords on the team too, so I don't really care.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the Vancouver Canucks and all the Pedersons. They just added another one to the mix there. But
Trey, you're saying that Edmonton is built Ford tough?
Pretty much, yeah.
I will never do that advertisement again.
I do like their Canadian receivers. I agree. I would like to see them maybe add another receiver or 2 in free agency. But you have to remember, what is the offense going to look like? A Trey Ford at quarterback offense with what the likes of Leak and Rankin at running back. It's probably going to be a run-heavy offense, so maybe they don't need as heavy of a crew at wide receiver if they're going to go more run-heavy of an offense. But we'll see what else they get there. But I love what they did on the defensive line. I love what they added to the offensive line. Give Ford more time to work back there is going to help him grow as quarterback. And Mark Killam bringing in a strong defense, which is somewhere where I feel like Edmonton could have gotten better as the season went along last year. So kudos to them. Great moves so far. The only pause I have every single year is you can buy a team in free agency, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. We saw the BC Lions do it, and I think it was Ed Hervey and the BC Lions do it a number of years ago, and no chemistry on the field. We've seen the Ottawa Red Blacks do it time and time again. They buy a team in free agency every year, and the last couple of years it hasn't panned out. Last year was better, but it fell off at the end. So on paper here on February 4th, seems like the Elks are improved and can be a contender in the West Division, but remains to be seen how they all gel out on the field. Any other thoughts on Edmonton here, or do you guys want to move on to another team?
No, I think you're about done with Edmonton. I mean, you're right, though, on the wide receiver one. And also one key miss that's actually missed on our sheet here is Dylan Mitchell. Edmonton Elk and went to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers after being released. So, yeah, that could be a bad release also now, because I really, really think that they need to be they need to really get some help in that wide receiver core. But there's some good names out there for wide receivers. So we'll see what happens.
The one I could, and I'm not sure how the money works out on it, but Stephen Dunbar is probably one of the top free agent receivers. He played in Edmonton before. Could we see a reunion there? That would be a pretty solid fit. But he may want to try to go out and get some money. But hey, we'll see what they do. They also did add Trey Odoms-Dukes, who was a former Stampeder who showed flashes there. So that could be a possibility for them there. Trey, what team do you want to talk about next?
You know what? Let's just go down the highway to the Stamps. I think that's a very interesting one to talk about. They didn't do a lot, like always. So
they haven't done a lot, but they've done more than they have in the past. There's more big items to talk about. I mean, the biggest one probably that isn't on our sheet here is Vernon Adams Jr. trade they made in November or early December, right after the Grey Cup. New fantasy starting quarterback in Vernon Adams Jr. And they're bringing in some nice weapons for him at receiver. Dominic Rhymes and Tevin. Dominic Rhymes confirmed to go to Calgary after being released by Ottawa, which was a bit of a surprise. And Tevin Jones rumored to be going to the Stamps as well. They joined the likes of Reggie Bagleton and Jalen Philpott. That's a pretty good top 4 at wide receiver there. Jeshra Nantwi also rumored to be going to Calgary as a backup running back role. I think he's from I think he played university at Calgary, so that's a homecoming of sorts for him. And defensive back, Damon Webb and Adrian Green. Damon Webb was one of my top 5 pending free agents when we did our lists and our draft a couple of weeks ago. So big addition there to the defensive backfield potentially here for the Stamps as well. If we look at the subtractions for the Stampeders, give me 1 second to flip that.
Oh, I'm on the wrong page. Did I just screw everything up?
No, we're good. We're good.
Okay.
They're losing a couple of quarterbacks. Matt Schultz, Tommy Stevens are going elsewhere, but they brought in PJ Walker, presumably to be the backup to Vernon Adams. Peyton Logan's been a focal point there the last little while in the return game / backup running back. He's moved on elsewhere. We'll get to them yet. We talked about Kobe Williams going to Edmonton, and then Trey Roberson also at defensive back. And then they've got their list of pending free agents there as well. I see FM Fan who provided this Excel sheet to us in the YouTube chat. Yes, it did work, and it's been a huge help. Thank you for your help with this episode. Calgary, though, Trey, you wanted to talk about them. What do you think about some of the names we've listed here?
Yeah, just like I said, kind of interesting that I thought maybe they would make a little bit bigger of a splash just with getting Vernon Adams in. I know traditionally that's not how they roll, but like we said, they're a little bit, I guess a couple more names. Getting Dominic Rhymes is definitely a big addition. Like they kind of got a couple of pieces on the offense and defense, but I thought they would maybe make a little bit more of a push for a guy like Lawler or Eugene Lewis or blanking on names right now. Some of these guys that we end up going east, that they maybe they were in on. I thought I saw somewhere that they were in on was it the one from BC that ended up re-signing there?
Hatcher? McInnes?
Yeah, they said they would have. Wasn't that the Farhan thing that they would have offered him if he hit the tampering window, but didn't? So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm just actually kind of surprised they didn't go a little bit more. Or what do you guys think? Was I a little bit maybe more eager on them? Adam?
You know what? I mean, they've got a great Canadian wide receiver there right now. In Jalen Philpott, but the problem is, I believe he's a free agent coming up, and you know what?
He signed an extension already this year.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't see that here, but you know what? They've got a couple of good players out of it. I mean, Dominic Rhymes is a good player. Tevin Jones, I mean, he's the 6th best receiver in the league.
Hey, shout out to me and my Tevin Jones pick.
And Damon Webb, I mean, he was a great defensive back in Ottawa. So they did get a few good players, but some of their subtractions right now, I mean, Matthew Schultz, it sounds like he's off to Ottawa, means probably somebody like, again, Jeremiah Mazzoli is going to be open or somewhere around there. Tommy Stevens, of course, coming to Saskatchewan today, apparently. Great short yardage quarterback. That hurts him a little bit. Then again, you've got Trey Robertson, again, rumored to be going to Ottawa. That's a big loss. They had also Rose, I believe he's gone and off, I think, to Saskatchewan.
Rose and Vaughters, the two they released there, right?
And Vaughters. So, I mean, those are big releases, and you know what? It hurts. I don't see that this is going to be a big sign up for our big signs for the Calgary Stampeders, and it's not a really good sign when you're losing some good people to free agency. I'm just taking a look if there's any other name. Micah Alway, he was in Saskatchewan before as a linebacker. Same with Micah Tights. Micah Tights is probably re-signed, I think. But I don't think Micah Alway has. That would be a big loss also for the Stampeders. But other than that, they got a few little pieces they need to work with and get. Running back, I think, is probably one of the bigger ones, although they did pick up Jeshwan Antwi today, I see. So that's an addition for the Stampeders. But then they did lose Peyton Logan to Winnipeg. So,
yeah, I don't know if it makes the Calgary running back situation any more clear with Mills being re-signed and now Antwi added to the mix. And I don't know How are they feeling about Kylan Hill, who's showed some flashes last season? I don't think it answers a whole lot. It's a good backup piece there. But, with Vernon Adams Jr., and they're going to be trying to replicate what he did with the air show early in the season in BC last year. And you stack up the receivers for VA and you build around that. And I think that they needed to go out and get some big pieces. I think Rhymes is a good fit there. I think Tevin Jones is a good underrated piece. Maybe he's not sixth best receiver in the CFL anymore, but I thought he could have been coming into last season. But he showed flashes when he was with the Elks there. So I like those additions. I think my thoughts on Calgary so far is this is a good start. It's a better start than they've had in recent years, and they needed to have a better start. But I think I still need to see more from them, unlike what I've seen from Edmonton on paper, to vault this team up in the West Division, because they just looked non-competitive for a lot of the second half of last season. Edmonton at least looked competitive at times and we thought had momentum. Calgary was just disappointing to watch. So I think we need to see more from the Stamps here going forward throughout free agency. And I don't know what position necessarily to focus on. I mean, I guess they cut a couple defensive linemen, so maybe some more defensive line help for them is the next focus that they should be looking towards. Any other thoughts on the Stamps here, guys?
I'm actually surprised they haven't gone after any of the offensive linemen available. I mean, I know that they usually do a very good job of drafting old linemen, but Calgary looked terrible last year in the O-line. Didn't give much protection for their quarterback. I thought they need help there, and they haven't really done anything to address it yet. That being said, it's still young. You can still get a few guys, but definitely some of the better ones are off the market already. So that's one I'm looking at with Calgary, and especially with Vernon Adams Jr. there. If you're going to rely on VA to burn everybody with their feet, you got to have some protection for them up front.
Now, is there anything when we're talking about them not doing enough? Is there anything about maybe they're putting all these offers out there, Trey, and they're just nobody's wanting to pick Calgary?
Oh, 100%. But I mean, as a fan base, or when you look at it, you still complain about. I know, being a Winnipeg Jets fan, every trade deadline, everyone's complaining that Chevy didn't do enough, and it's like, well, how many players have no trade clauses to bring them to Winnipeg, right? So it is what it is, but it's still a part of it where I guess they haven't made the franchise. It's still on them that the franchise isn't appealing enough, right? Wasn't it one of the worst ones when it came to that rating thing that came out?
I just looked that up, actually. Yeah, they had an average grade of C-, including a D+ in family treatment and a D- in nutrition and diet. So I wonder how much these reports have actually been impacting where guys go.
Yeah. Well, who knows? Like, again, that's still on the team that they should have. That when they're making these offers, they say, "Hey, all that stuff we've addressed it," right? So clearly they didn't do that enough either. If they haven't signed, but again, Calgary's traditionally not a team that goes crazy free agency, and the fact that they went and traded VA is probably traded for VA is way above what they normally kind of go for, right? So, yeah.
Well, weren't they on the list to go, like on the short list for some receivers? Like, I think it was between them and Hamilton for Kenny Lawler, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's what I mean. They're just missing out. So I guess they were there. They're still losing, though. That's kind of my point, is they have to give that extra 10, 15,000 maybe to get a guy like that, and they're not doing it. They're losing to Hamilton. Hamilton rather pay the little extra, right? So I thought maybe this was the year that Calgary would go and do that little extra and kind of break their mold. But no, I'm wrong.
Well, that's the problem for Dickinson too, right? Like, he has to be aggressive because I think this is his last chance this year. If he has another year like last year, it could be the end of Dave Dickinson in Calgary. But there's only so much you can do if you put out a good offer and guys decide to go elsewhere. There's not a whole ton you can do besides come up with some backup options. Adam, you mentioned Kenny Lawler going to Hamilton instead of Calgary. I think that's a good team to go to next. So we move over to the East Division here.
To the Hamilton Blue Bombers or what?
The Hamilton Blue Bombers, yeah, Ted Gavaya. You knew that him going over to Hamilton from Winnipeg was going to bring some of his guys over there. And a couple of key re-signings. Ante Milanovic-Litre at running back re-signed for 2 years, and Keandre Smith for 2 years at Canadian wide receiver. I think I had him on my list of top 5 free agents a couple weeks ago there as well. I think that was an absolutely crucial move for them to bring him back. But then to add to that, yet Kenny Lawler, Drew Wolotarski, and Josh Johnson. Moving on at wide receiver. Not a big fan of Josh Johnson from what I saw from him in Winnipeg, but nonetheless, Lawler, Wolotarski, that's pretty good additions there. Liam Dobson on the offensive line from Winnipeg to Hamilton. That's a nice addition for the Ticats there. Taiwan Garbett also from the Bombers. So that's 5 former Bombers going over to the Ticats. And then Reggie Stubblefield's an interesting one. Defensive back for the Alouettes, had a really good rookie year. And then had that game this year, I think it was game 1 this past year, where he injured Chris Strevler, or took a shot at Chris Strevler, and then suddenly he ended up injured and was out for the season, so only played 1 game. The Ticats signed him to a 3-year rumored contract, which is a surprising length of contract for him, but he's a young guy. What do we think of the Ticats additions here, Adam?
I like them. I mean, I think that they really gave Bo Levi Mitchell some more weapons in the receiving core. Liam Dobson's going to be great for backing or making sure that he stays upright. That's a big piece. I like the offensive moves. I mean, I think there's some defensive moves that still need to be made by Hamilton to really put them over the edge, but they're doing well so far. Garbett was a good pickup as well, and the defensive line, I did like that one too. Overall, though, Hamilton's improved. I think that they're a better team than they were yesterday. And, honestly, it would be very interesting to see a list of who everybody thinks is right now is the top 3 teams for receivers. Who's got the top 3 receivers? Because it's an arms race everywhere right now for a lot of teams.
That's what I want to do. That's what I want to do as one of our next episodes post Free Agent Frenzy. Is I think we should rank the teams wide receiver because it is going to be difficult, and I think we're all going to have different answers.
Oh yeah, like I said, everybody's going to have a different opinion on that. This receiver is better than this receiver, and I mean, there isn't much really separating receivers from other receivers. Essentially, maybe like right now, if I had to do it, probably number 9 is Calgary. And number 1, don't make me choose.
Get the coin out, right?
Yeah.
I don't think I agree on Calgary being number 9, so let's save it for that episode because more dominoes will fall, and I think we're going to have very different answers. But Trey, what do you think on what you've seen from Hamilton so far?
I think this shows, did Bo rework his contract again this offseason? Yeah, this is them showing, hey, we're going to give you rework it. We're going to do something this year. And they got him at least 1 extra guy on the O-line. I really like Liam Dobson here in Winnipeg. They got him. They re-signed Keandre Smith, who I think you and me talked about last week, Ryan, where I said they need to re-sign him. I don't like that was even before thinking Lawler and Wolotarski and all these other things were even possibilities. So they got that. And they had Lawler, who arguably, is now the highest paid non-quarterback in the league, reportedly. Drew Wolotarski, Canadian depth, which now they could do they could have Keandre Smith and Wolotarski out there and save and get an extra American on defense or on the offensive line. I already said Dobson. I like Garb, but I saw something that he didn't get a sack last year, but I felt like he was always in quarterback's faces. I don't know. Maybe I heard that wrong. Maybe he did. I don't know. Somebody tweeted something about because Garbutt and somebody else left the Bombers line, and they were like, well, everyone was kind of complaining and why they barely did anything. So, but I liked his presence out there. He definitely pressured a lot. And yes, Stubblefield, when he's on and not injured, he must have did something to earn a 3-year contract in the CFL. They don't give those out to non-quarterbacks. So I think, Hamilton, I agree with Adam. I have no idea how I'd rank the receiving cores right now. I don't even know. I'm not confident in a 1 or 9. You know what I mean? I don't know. In this one, and geez, I did not see Kenny Lawler going to Hamilton. That one was not on my. If anything, I saw out west or something. I don't know why. Between Hamilton and Ottawa, man, how crazy they went today or the last couple of days. I'm flabbergasted.
With the season Bo had last year and the emergence of Greg Bell at running back and how well he played, late in the season and now at the next year for him there. And you look at the wide receiver core of Tim White, Shamar Bridges, hopefully recovered well from that injury that ended his season, Kenny Lawler, Keandre Smith, and let's say Drew Wolodarski as your top 5 with 2 Canadians in there at receiver. And again, some national flexibility. That is a pretty darn good receiving core for this team. So yeah, good job by the Ticats so far. They were one of the teams I was most interested in whether they would be active or not, because they didn't have a ton of free agents. And I kind of thought they were a team that didn't need to do much and could just roll with the momentum of second half of the season where their defense played a lot better. Their offense was on a roll. And if they would have gotten into the playoffs, I think could have done damage last year. So I'm a little surprised they have been as active as they have been so far, but new GM wants to put his stamp on things and is doing a good job so far in terms of pieces they've lost. David Beard going over to Edmonton on the offensive line. Dobson fills that role. And they did release Dwayne Hendricks on the defensive line, and Garbett kind of fills that role. So they've kind of filled every spot where they've maybe lost a piece. I'm very high on what Hamilton's done so far.
What do you think about a guy like O'Leary Orange then, since now they already got 2 Canadians in there, Ryan?
I'd assume he's not coming back to Hamilton. Like they've got Hakuna Vanu, I think, is another Canadian there too. So I don't know. O'Leary Orange, I was excited for him to get a starting opportunity last year coming out of his time in Winnipeg. I liked him here in Winnipeg. He got injured a lot last year, so it wasn't as impactful possibly. But I think he's a good depth signing for a team out there that needs some national depth for sure.
Yeah.
Anything else with the Ticats?
No, I fear that receiving core again. Shamar Bridges, and again, we haven't even mentioned the word Tim White yet this episode.
I meant it a bit ago, but
did you? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, well, like I said, forget just ranking receiving cores. Try ranking these teams. I have no idea how. Looking at it today, it's a 4-horse race in the East and a 5-horse race in the West. I have no idea. They're neck and neck right now, and geez, and I don't know. I feel like sometimes we don't see. I don't know. Do we see a lot of big? I don't know. Sometimes I feel like free agencies are kind of boring, and then this one's already going nuts. So I don't know. We only talked about 3 teams. We only talked about 3 teams, and I'm already like losing my mind.
Yeah, we have 6 more to talk about, and we're 45 minutes into the episode. Could be a long night here, guys. When you were talking about Bo's restructured contract.
Sorry.
When you were talking about Bo's restructured contract before, do you think that was like, to me, I almost feel like it was restructured to give him more money because he was only making like, what was it, $150 or something $1,000 last year? It was like the 9th or 10th highest paid quarterback, and I assume after his MOP finalist year that maybe they would work something out and said, hey, no, I kind of deserve more than that, which would make it extra impressive if they find money to fit this all into this imaginary thing called the salary cap.
Watch me be completely wrong. I've just never heard of a team restructuring to give a player more money in any league.
You would think, right?
Right. So unless he was like, I'm retiring unless you give me more money, which at that time, if I'm Hamilton, I'd say don't let the door hit you, right? Like, so because not many players are worth doing that for.
Because I don't think there's any way he's restructuring for less than what he made last year,
well,
unless it's like restructuring more incentive based.
That might be it too. If Hamilton makes all this moves and they go on a tear and win the Grey Cup, who cares if Bo's contract makes him $50,000 over the salary cap, like every other team has been over the last 10 years, right? So,
but again, you got to remember, Bo Levi Mitchell was the MOP last year in the East. I mean, he's probably worth a little bit more money than he did get. Maybe it was contracted weird, or they had to juggle money. Let's put it that way. I don't know how they did it. I don't know if it was because he was due a bonus and Hamilton wanted to keep that money for their contracts. Who cares? You know what? In the end, they got the quarterback they want, I guess. They've got the receiver core probably that they want. This is going to be fun watching the Hamilton Tiger Cats this season.
The classic Cavis Reed envelopes under the table deal, maybe, perhaps. Adam, which team do you want to go to next?
You know what? Let's go to the Ottawa Red Blacks. They've done a pile of stuff this year as well. Let's talk Ottawa for a little bit here, Ryan.
Yeah, sure. Let me pull up the Ottawa Red Blacks. They've had a busy offseason just re-signing a lot of their own pieces in terms of rumored new additions. So on top of that, like very, very active in that sense. Trey and I were talking about it last week and going through just all of these guys they've re-signed. They seem to be adding quarterback depth in Matt Schultz to add to the likes of Drew Brown and Dustin Crum, who they've re-signed. Seems to be spelling the end of Jeremiah Mazzoli in Ottawa. They seem to be winning the Eugene Lewis sweepstakes at around $235,000 per year on a 2-year deal for Ottawa. I know there was talk about last week we were mentioning Hervey didn't want to pay him $300,000 and wanted to bring the price back down, and I guess Ottawa found the right deal to make it work for Eugene Lewis. And then a slew of defensive backs: Trey Roberson, Amari Henderson, Robert Priester, and Nafis Lyon, all coming over to Ottawa. That being said, a number of subtractions. They released Dominic Rhymes. Jalen Acklin announces his retirement. Congrats to Jalen Acklin on a fantastic career, by the way. He's been around for a number of years. Started in Hamilton, was a premier part of that offense, moved over to Ottawa, was a central part there as well. Unfortunately, I don't believe any Grey Cups for Jalen Acklin in his career, but solid career nonetheless. They lose Gregor McKellar to Edmonton on the offensive line. They lose another one, Cyril Hugan-Sedon, to the Montreal Alouettes. And then Damon Webb, the big subtraction at defensive back. And I'll throw Brandon Dandridge, who they released as well, as a subtraction at defensive back. So they've lost some pieces here for sure, but they brought a lot of the team back, and there's some juicy new names here, including the likes of Eugene Lewis. Trey, what do you think about Eugene Lewis going to Ottawa? I don't think either of us had him going there last week when we made our predictions, if I remember correctly.
No, I think I said that he's going to end up back in Edmonton. It was the whole tweeting about breaking up with your ex and he would go back, and I was wrong there. But no, I think that's a big addition on the receiving core. They do have a couple losses there in Rhymes and Acklin, but that definitely helps there. I'm actually kind of interested, and I'm going to go maybe a curveball here with Matthew Schultz. I think that brings some more competition under center with the guy like Brown, who's still a young guy and, could have a shorter leash than most starting quarterbacks if we're giving him the starting role. And Dustin Crum there, who, the Crum back seems to be, when you have the Crum back and Matthew Schultz, who are both shown that they can start at times in this league, that gives a little bit more depth than the injury-prone Jeremiah Mazzoli, right? So I'm really actually intrigued in the quarterback room as well, because I think regardless of who's there, I think this team could function very well, especially with the receiving core in place. And their defense had moments last year too, and then they just added some pretty good defensive backs to their team. Adam?
You know what? I look at Ottawa and they've added some nice pieces. Again, I did not expect Eugene Lewis to go to Ottawa, I'll be honest. I thought maybe it would be BC. Reason being is, again, they've got Nathan Rourke there. They want some weapons. Probably the dollar didn't work, I would think. Saskatchewan I had kind of half marked because it's my dark horse. And the reason being was the Riders have not had a really solid number one American receiver for a little while. Again, a guy that you just know is right there, and that's him, and that's going to be the guy. Matt Dominguez is the last guy I can think of, really. I mean, G. Roy Simon was there one time for that, but boy, it's been a while since Riders have had that number one American guy for a wide receiver. So I thought maybe there was a chance of that. But you know what? Ottawa made a good pickup there, I think. They did lose some big pieces in the offensive line again. They did gain the guys they probably wanted to keep. I mean, Darius Bladek's still there. They've still got
Jacob Ruby.
Yeah, Jacob Ruby, I think, was the loss, wasn't it?
No, he resigned there as well.
He did resign? Okay.
Yeah.
So they do have Ruby back. They do have Bladek back. Desjardins still there. Deontay Bull's still on a rookie contract. So they still have some good pieces in Ottawa for offensive line. This is a team that I think if they can get their quarterback stuff figured out, I think could still be a contender in the East. Although I hope they don't play Mari Henderson against Kenny Lawler. We've all seen what happened in there before. So, yeah.
3 times this year.
Yeah. Don't remind me.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know really what I want Ottawa to do this offseason. They brought a lot of pieces back. We talked about it last week. They strong start to the year and carry it over momentum, try to get back on track. Like, seemed like they needed to make some changes, but what are those? Yeah, Lewis is a huge addition to that receiving core when we talk about them. We talk about Pimpleton, Justin Hardy, Braylon Addison. Those guys all re-signed. Now you add Eugene Lewis. You've got Nick Mardner, up-and-coming Canadian receiver there. That's a pretty good receiving core that the Red Blacks have going here as well. And you know what? Another year, another step forward for Drew Brown as a starting quarterback as well, who was able to sling it at times last season. Struggled to put touchdowns on the board early in the year, but then I remember in the playoff game, part of it was playing from behind, and there were some interceptions that ultimately did them in, but he was able to make some big plays there. So adding Eugene Lewis to the mix is going to certainly help in that category. I don't know if I can say they're better off, though, with Lewis coming in than they were having Ryans and Acklin there combined. I think it's kind of a lateral movement for me at this point. Maybe a little bit of improvement there. But they do get the biggest wide receiver name on the free agent market. Anything else on Ottawa here, guys? If not, where do we want to go next? Trey, you want to pick the next team? Trey might be having internet issues.
Trey seems to be having internet issues.
Sure.
he's back.
Oh, no, that was my fault. Am I good now?
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah? Okay, let's go to the West Coast. Let's go to BC. That was my fault. I was opening up my horse racing app on my computer, and my computer will only do 3 things at once before it crashes. So I won't do that anymore.
Fair enough. That's a good plan. All right, BC. We're going to the BC Lions.
Very interesting.
Got some cross feed again from Trey's network connection. So let me tell you about the BC Lions signings, and we'll let Trey's internet catch up. They released Keon Hatcher, and one day later, Keon Hatcher is back. They released Alexander Hollins, who remains to be a free agent. So 2 big names there. Re-signing Justin McInnes was the biggest move, I think, for the Lions at wide receiver. Nathan Rourke restructured his contract to maybe make a little bit more room to make that happen. In terms of other moves on the defensive line, Marcus Moore re-signed to a 2-year contract. Dwayne Hendricks from the Ticats was released by them, looks to be going over to the Lions. And then Deontay Williams and Jalen Edwards-Cooper at defensive back. One an extension for Edwards Cooper, and then Deontay Williams coming over from the Riders. So a couple of moves there. I think Keon Hatcher, the most interesting one for us to talk about in terms of pieces going elsewhere for the Lions. Joshua Nantwi going to Calgary, as we talked about. Joshua Archibald, who's rumored to be going over to the Montreal Alouettes. Emmanuel Ragamba, defensive back, going to Edmonton, and then Adrian Green going over to Calgary, and then they've got their pending list of free agents, of course, as well. Keon Hatcher, Adam, what do you make of Keon Hatcher? Trey and I were talking about it a little bit last week about the couple of receivers, Hollins, Hatcher. What do you do if you're BC? Are you surprised, A, that they released him, and B, that he's back?
I'm surprised he's back, to be honest. I thought that when they released him, okay, this is the guy with the ACL tear 2 years ago. He's probably the guy most banged up on the team. He didn't have a great 2024. He didn't look great last year. So, I thought, okay, you know what? They gave him a lot of money, hoping he was going to be okay. He didn't turn out to be great. You know what? He's the guy on the chopping block. I was very surprised to see Alexander Hollins get his free agency paper.
I wasn't.
That one did surprise me a little bit because, again, Hollins has been a very good receiver since coming into this league. But that being said, I guess guys got to move on. Guys got to do their thing. Uh, like I said, I was even more surprised though to see the BC Lions sign Keon Hatcher back. I guess the price was right because maybe other teams just told him we don't want you. I don't know what the story is, but BC, I guess, did a pretty shrewd move, saved some money probably in a signing bonus or something or other, and got Hatcher back. So all's good for the BC Lions in that case. Signing wise, I did like their signing of Deontay Williams. As much as I'm going to miss him, seeing him in Saskatchewan. They weren't using him very much in Riderville. They should have used him more because I think he was actually a really good defensive back. We'll see eventually if that one will bite the Riders in the rear end. My opinion is yes, it will because he actually was pretty good. For the other moves that they've made so far, Marcus Moore, again, D lineman. Again, I don't hear of him very much, but probably looking like maybe a promising young guy coming up, only 27 years old. So that's a good thing. And Jalen Edwards-Cooper's an interesting one. He went to the Riders last year. He didn't pass the physical. So the Riders cut him, said, go get healthy. We'll sign you back up. All of a sudden, he signs in BC and then plays really good for BC and then gets a contract extension here. So, okay.
That was a weird one because Edwards Cooper was the biggest defensive free agent prize I feel like last year because didn't he not allow a touchdown the year before when he was initially with BC? Then he signed in Saskatchewan and then it didn't work out, and like you said, and they're on from there. So it seems like maybe he's regained his game. But Trey, you chose the Lions. I think your internet's caught up now. Seems like you're moving there. Yeah. What about BC interests you?
No, I'm sorry, guys. I'll stop touching the Horsey account while we're doing this show. Can't do everything. I'm thinking BC. I don't mind BC right now. The whole Hatcher thing, we like all these releases and re-signs were a little weird, but I liked what they've regained so far, and I don't think they've lost overly a lot. Like Antwi, meh. A couple. Like, he could be good, but they never really use. What I'm really interested in is those 3 offensive linemen that they don't have re-signed yet in Chung, Couture, and Neville, and wonder if how many of those guys, if all 3, if 2, if 1, if none, are they going to bring back? Because I think those are big pieces of their guy like Couture and Chung and even Neville. They're all like, those are big pivotal parts. They're 30 years old, which isn't ancient in offensive lineman years, and it's almost sometimes that sweet spot in O-line where you want the guy 30 to 30 something because there's a little bit of maturity in that position. So that's kind of where I'm looking at more. Will BC be able to keep that offensive line going? Because I felt like at times some of their downfall was Rourke didn't have time to get the ball out. I think he was maybe a little too used to the NFL system, and VA a little bit more of a dancer when he was in there, was able to get in and out. So what are your guys' thoughts on that old line in BC?
Well, I think the one underrated move that they made a couple of weeks ago is the trade for Dijon Allen of the Toronto Argonauts, who was one of the top offensive linemen in the CFL last season on that Argos offensive line. So I think that fills one of those holes pretty nicely, but there's still a couple more pieces that you named there that haven't been replaced. And I think the offensive line was kind of under scrutiny in BC last season. So, Rourke didn't have his best season when he came back, and, they're trying to build around him, but I don't think they've successfully built around him so far this offseason. Like, if Rourke's taking that pay cut so that you can afford more options to build around him, is bringing back Justin McInnes versus maybe bringing another piece on the market or 2 pieces off the market, like, is that equal in terms of? I don't feel like the weapons are necessarily there for BC besides the James Butler, bring him in a couple weeks ago. I think I like him a little bit more than Stanback as a fit in that offense at running back. But I look at receiver and I look at, you've got McInnes is the big one. You've got Keon Hatcher coming back. Hopefully he can get back to the top of his game. Javon Catoy has been serviceable for the last couple of years. Then I think there's some question marks. They've seen it last year. They rotated Aiden and Eberhardt in there. They rotated Stanley Berryhill in there. They had some good games here and there, but they weren't that star caliber receiving core necessarily that we were just talking about with Hamilton and with Ottawa. So if we were to rank them, I might put BC lower in the category, which is not necessarily what it seemed they were trying to do by building around Rourke here. If we're talking about the offensive line maybe losing some steps, the receiving core not being there quite yet. I think this team has to be more active yet than they have been in free agency. Adam?
Yeah, I agree. Especially when you look at the defensive side of the ball too. I mean, they've got a lot of openings there that are pretty critical to what they need to be doing. I mean, Deontay Evans, TJ Lee, two good defensive backs that could really end up almost anywhere, I guess. Nathan Cherry with a defensive line, that's a national. And I mean, he is one of those guys that could really ratio break a spot open for somebody if they really need to. So I'm looking at their defensive side of the football and think that they need to be doing some more work. Definitely either bringing back what they've got, or they got to look elsewhere and really bring something else in, because there's a lot of open spots there on the defense that need to be filled before this training camp starts.
Any other thoughts on the Lions here before we move on to another?
They aren't allowed to draft Curtis Rourke, are they?
Might be a waste of a pick, but yeah, they could if they want.
They could if they want. That is true. Let's move on to the Montreal Alouettes next, because this is going to be a really quick topic. They haven't done much. They really haven't at all so far, so we don't have too much news to talk about. We can talk about the pieces they've lost. The only noted additions so far on the offensive line, Cyril Hogan-Sedon from the Red Blacks, and on the defensive line, Joshua Archibald from the BC Lions, rumored to be going over to Montreal. Pretty quiet so far for them. They've lost a few defensive backs in the Feast Lion and Reggie Stubblefield that we've already talked about. And at wide receiver, kind of Julian Grant and Reggie White Jr. I feel like Julian Grant is a big loss at wide receiver for the Montreal Alouettes. Tyson Philpott is that big number one Canadian receiver, but having both of them in there was pretty nice to be able to run both of those at the receiving core for this team. So I don't know. What do you think of Montreal? Because they won the Cup 2 years ago. They seemed like the dominant force this last season. They've got new starting quarterback, Davis Alexander, who they gave the 3-year contract in the reins to. Are you expecting Montreal to be more active, or are you keeping them together as they are, Trey?
Sorry, what was the question?
For the Alouettes, so would you expect them to be more active than they've been thus far after losing the East Final last year, or are you just keeping everything together and running it back?
I thought so, because they're kind of going a different direction in quarterback. Try to maybe give them some more pieces, but instead they lost, like we said, 2 receivers. I thought they would do more, but are they a team that does a lot? They've kind of been the Calgary of the East a little bit. They don't do overly a lot, I feel like. Or am I missing something?
No, I would agree with that, right, Adam?
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think they really do a whole lot in free agency. They do build their players from within. I mean, take a look at that wide receiving core right now. They've got a lot of players in there that can fill in a lot of places. You're going to have Tyson Philpott back next year who'll be healthy. You still got Austin Mack in there. You've got James Letcher, who's turning into a really good special team / receiver. Tyler Snead, Cole Speaker. I mean, Isaiah Washington even had instances. I think he'll be probably a lot better than he was last year. Again, they have a good depth almost everywhere. Some of the places maybe where they should be looking at a little bit. And if they're going from within, I'm kind of surprised that they haven't picked up Philippe Gagnon yet. Again, a good national offensive lineman. If you look also Avery Ellis, I think, is also a good defensive lineman. I think that's a spot where they probably could use the guys back. But overall, again, Montreal, builds their own guys. They have their own guys. They got Laval beside them, so they seem to always pull out of there and get the guys they want when they want them. I don't think anybody is probably going to go and sign the 36-year-old defensive lineman that I'm thinking of from Montreal. He'll be a free agent coming up here.
You want to bet on that?
Nah, I don't think I'm going to bet on it. That might be
dangerous. Of course, you're
dangerous.
talking about Sean Lemon.
No, of course I am. So, yeah, other than that, you know what? Montreal's doing what they always do. They don't really have a lot of signings that they probably want to make. Maybe a couple re-signings. That's about it.
The concern for me is seeing how much better these other teams in the East might be getting right now, where they're catching up to Montreal, right? And I kind of wonder if a direction they go. I think one of the weaknesses this team had last year, one of the few they had, was they couldn't stop the run game. Their defense, much like Winnipeg, was a great shutdown defense, but couldn't stop the run. And maybe both those teams proved that you don't really need to stop the run to be a good football team in the CFL. But I wonder if there's anything on the defensive line or in the linebacking core that they look to switch up in free agency here to address that, because I think that's the only hole we really saw from them for the most part last year, and inefficiency was in stopping the run. Anything else on Montreal here?
No.
Can they check to make sure Danny Machocha during Groundhog's Day, make sure he's come out of his shadow and, tried a little bit to sign somebody?
Well, remember, yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Like 2 years ago when the whole ownership thing was happening, they didn't sign much, and they won the Grey Cup, right? So
it's true.
They brought in Cody Fajardo.
Fair, but they brought in his replacement this year, so we can make that argument.
And traded for Cody Fajardo.
That they did. And they brought in McLeod Bethel-Thompson. So, not that that's going to make a huge impact necessarily, but hopefully it's Davis Alexander all the way. All right, not much to talk about on Montreal for now. Hopefully when we reconvene for 8 hours next week, we'll have some big signings to talk about when we get to chatting about the Alouettes there. I think 3 teams left for us to talk about now. I think it's just down to Saskatchewan, Toronto, and Winnipeg. Adam, which team you want to talk about?
You know what? Let's go with the Toronto Argonauts. They did some pretty interesting things in the last few days, and might lead into another team right after that. So,
all right, let's get the Argos up on my screen here. A couple of the biggest re-signing, which they teased with multiple pictures of people with toothpicks on their social media, is Winton McManus, because am I remembering right? Does he play with a toothpick in his mouth? I feel like I've seen.
I have no idea. That does not sound very good for your health.
No, it does not. I could be wrong.
Sidelined for sure, I thought.
Yeah, I think at least. But yeah, McManus, one of the top linebackers in the game. Was he my number 1 or number 2 on the free agent list last time? I'm trying to look back and see. When we drafted our teams, or somebody drafted him pretty high. Here we go. I've got it here. He was my round 2 pick. Winton McManus was. So big move to get him back for at least one more year. Nick Arbuckle also being brought back by the Argos at quarterback. Celestin Haba from the Bombers defensive line, 25-year-old defensive lineman to the Argos, and Darius Bratton at defensive back from the Elks on a 2-year deal. Going to Toronto. In terms of pieces they've lost, they released wide receiver Tommy Neild, who has signed in Saskatchewan. They've lost half their defensive line. Robbie Smith, Jake Seresna, and Jared Brinkman all going to Edmonton. Royce Metier to Edmonton at defensive back as well, and Robert Priester to Ottawa. And then they have a pretty extensive free agent list here yet. So, Adam, you wanted to talk about the Argos. What do you think?
Well, I like the Nick Arbuckle re-signing. I mean, you got to have somebody behind Chad Kelly, and I don't think they really have the confidence in Cameron Duke, so probably a free agent. So we'll see where he ends up afterwards and all of the chaos and anarchy that's coming with this. I'm kind of surprised Kadeem Carey, has he signed anywhere, or did I hear that right? Or he hasn't been gone anywhere, which is pretty amazing. I know he's an older running back nowadays, and 32. I mean, I shouldn't be saying older because I'm a little bit older than that yet. But, kind of amazing that he's he's still on the market here, and nobody's really, well, you haven't heard nothing about him. I mean, it's kind of amazing as well. Woody Barron's a big one also, I think, in the defensive line. He's a little bit older nowadays, but he's always been a very strong defensive lineman. It's quite amazing, though, that Toronto's lost a lot of defensive linemen, and none of them to their old defensive coordinator. Interesting. Other than that, though, yeah, Toronto, I think, really kind of got the guys they wanted back right away. I mean, they got back Janarian Grant, which was a huge one for the Argonauts. You look with McManus. I mean, they weren't going to let him go. If they let him go, I would be utterly stunned and asking a lot of questions of what they were doing there. The last one, though, that I want to see, and I want to see where he goes, is Deshaun Amos. He was a really good defensive back last year. I thought that he kind of was underrated for what the Argonauts had there. It'll be interesting to see where he ends up. I won't even take a guess, to be honest with you. There's so many defensive backs this year. You never know where anybody can end up. So, no, Argonauts, I think, are okay. They got a few things to do yet, but overall, not bad. Trey, what do you think?
No, I'm a little surprised Arbuckle re-signed there. And other than that, I think you have the bigger story in Toronto's the pieces they lost, right? Like we said, the defensive line and a couple other pieces there. They haven't really added much, but yeah, they also got Janarian Grant back, which I guess you don't really need an offense or defense if you start the play on the other team's side of the ball every time, right? So yeah, no, Toronto's another interesting one. I think that between Montreal and Toronto, so far it looks like maybe they took a little half step back, and then Ottawa maybe took a half step forward, and Hamilton did a hop, skip, and a jump forward a little bit on some positions. So I'm really interested on that. But Toronto and Montreal could just also be playing that, hey, we just need to get first or second to get that home playoff game. We're not too worried about Hamilton or Ottawa. What have they shown? They can have all those people on their roster too. So I don't know. I thought Toronto maybe was another one that would make a little bit bigger of a splash. They are the defending cup champs though. So how many times do those guys really make big splashes? Those teams always seem to lose a lot of pieces and then still are pretty dang good. So,
I feel like they've had a harder time than the last couple of years than the Bombers have, despite their 5 straight trips to the finals, of retaining the team, right? And even after the back-to-back Bombers championships, like, yes, you retain the key pieces like Wynton McManus, but there are a lot of key pieces of this team that have they can't afford to bring back, it seems, right? And, DeMonte Coxie I would add into the list of notable ones they did re-sign as well on the offensive side of the ball. And they've made some other key signings there, but under the subtractions, throw in the one we were talking about earlier, offensive lineman Dijon Allen getting traded away was probably something they had to do from a cap perspective there as well. I'm sure they didn't want to let him go. So, yeah, this team's seemingly struggling, and maybe they don't have that same loyalty commitment type of thing that Winnipeg has, where they've been able to bring guys back and get guys to take as many notable pay cuts as much as, Argos keep upper ownership says, hey, we're going to force these guys to take a pay cut. Seems like they're having a hard time keeping those pieces there. And I look at Jake Serezna as one that I feel like maybe they wish they got back a little bit, because they traded Curly Gittins Jr. to Edmonton for Serezna, and he was a rental. Granted, they won the Grey Cup, so maybe they're happy enough with it. But now they get, let him go back to Edmonton. Edmonton basically got Gittins Jr. for loaning a year of Serezna and get him back is an interesting wrinkle to that trade there. So yeah, I think Toronto's taking a bit of a step forward or a step backwards here, but it remains to be seen what they're going to replace these guys with. In the Discord earlier today, when the Nick Arbuckle signing was shared, Trey, you had an interesting question in there about the leash on Chad Kelly that I want to explore a little bit, where you were wondering if bringing him back makes the leash any shorter.
Well, I think it does, but I know you thought differently. I get one game, but one game isn't always enough, and Nick Arbuckle maybe had a little bit more of a career, but the one game or one drive was all it took for Chad Kelly to take the spot from McLeod Bethel Thompson. So I'm just a little surprised that's why I thought maybe Nick Arbuckle says, heck with you guys, you're asking for pay cuts. I'm a Grey Cup winning champion, and I'm not going to get suspended for 8 games, and I'm not going to have all these other issues and stuff. And you want to go with this guy? Maybe they got a better relationship. Maybe this Chad Kelly stuff isn't as blown up as you know what I mean. It could be a lot of different things, but I thought Nick Arbuckle, if there was an opening, would have found somewhere else, or maybe it was just the no opening situation that landed him back in Toronto. But that makes me also think. I think that means 1 or 2 bad games out of Chad Kelly. Why not go with the guy who literally just won you a Grey Cup in November?
I think you see $1.8 million in 3 years on the contract. You're going to be having a very hard time to convince your fan base to go and have that sitting on the bench, no matter what happens here.
I would love to see $1.8 million sitting on the Bombers bench with Zach Collaros, man. Don't tell me that. I would love to see it.
That there's probably like an NFL third-string quarterback that's like, I get paid that all day, and I sit like in the practice roster. But you know what? No, honestly, Chad Kelly's the reason that team has got any real success right now. I don't see Chad Kelly having a very short leash right now until if he majorly screws up and something else happens or something else could happen, and maybe that's their insurance policy in case something else happens. Again, look at a Deshaun Watson in the U.S. Of why maybe you want to have that backup quarterback.
What's your NFL team again, Adam?
Well, anyways. You know what? That's the only reason I could see you wanting to maybe give make sure Nick Arbuckle sticks around, because you do always need that second string quarterback no matter what happens. If Chad Kelly's injury progression isn't as good as it maybe should be, or if there's something else, or if something else happens, you never know what can happen in a season. You're one shot away from needing a good backup quarterback, and Nick Arbuckle is a very good backup quarterback. So I don't think it's because of Chad Kelly's performance. I think it's more of, you know what, one hit and Nick Arbuckle needs to be the guy. So, I think there's lots in the CFL who would love to give Chad Kelly the hit.
See, I'm not even saying that it's necessarily the Argos didn't want Nick Arbuckle to be the backup. Every team wants a guy like that. I just have a tough time. That would just, maybe it's something my mind can't comprehend. If I came in, the best I got, if I come in and play beer league baseball and I win them the championship, and then next year they tell me I'm sitting the bench, I'm going to say, heck with you guys. Right? Like, I just, it's such a tough, maybe it's just a professional sports thing that I can't understand, because again, if Ryan Dinwiddie won that Grey Cup for the Bombers years ago, I would have bet he was the starter the next year. And
but then I'll argue, would they have even gotten to the Cup if Arbuckle was in the entire year?
Fair point.
Chad Kelly didn't come in, right? So that's the other side of it too.
You can make that argument a few years ago. If Chad Kelly started instead of MBT?
Yeah, and it's a fair question. It's a fair question that you were asking, and that comparison between Kelly a couple of years ago. I actually just pulled up like their age, the number of years, stats, etc. I think it's a little bit different in that Kelly at that time was 28, 29. He was kind of more in the young, in your prime quarterback. Maybe take a chance on a younger quarterback at the time. Whereas Arbuckle now is, he's 31 right now. He's been in the league now for 6 years already. This isn't a fresh. I feel like we know what we're getting from Nick Arbuckle for the most part, although he surprised me in the Grey Cup with that performance. So it feels a little different.
I just disagree, because like different settings can just be different things. Arbuckle might not have had the setting. We see Baker Mayfield. Different settings. Geno Smith got the reins. They know maybe different league, but certain guys get different reins in different situations. Zach Collaros, you know what I mean? Maybe he showed a lot better than Nick Arbuckle did early in his career, but sometimes it just takes a different scenery. So that's where I'm like, I didn't think that he would just completely dethrone Chad Kelly, because again, Adam made the point of the salary hit there and everything. But yeah, I just thought some team maybe would want him as a starting quarterback, but where would he go? You know, he'd be the perfect guy if there was an expansion draft this year. I think would be going to Quebec or Halifax or whatever, North Dakota Gophers or whatever team is eventually the 10th team. But yeah, it was a weird situation where I just felt I would be weird walking in there. But you know, good on him for being better than me. So
I think this is the best spot for him to return to, though, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, Adam, because if Kelly's not ready to go at the start of the season, he's getting starting time. If not, like, he's with a team that knows and trusts him in big opportunities if he needs to go into. Like, that's probably the best backup to starter potential spot he has, given the injury uncertainty of Kelly. Sorry, Adam, I cut you off there.
No, and I agree because, again, you never know what can happen with Chad Kelly. There's a lot of variables there, and with that injury especially. And again, we all know the history of Chad Kelly doing something dumb when he shouldn't be doing, but nevertheless, there's an opportunity there, probably more than, let's say, he goes to BC, and if Nathan Rourke doesn't get hurt, Nathan Rourke ain't going out. If you look at a team again, Edmonton has a backup. Calgary has a backup in PJ Walker. Saskatchewan has a backup now in Jake Mayer. Winnipeg is probably maybe an opportunity, but is it?
I mean, Claros
they're going to ride Claros until he falls over.
Yeah.
Hamilton, Ottawa, they all got Hamilton and Montreal have the same situation. Ottawa's maybe a little more of a chance, but that's a crowded backfield. So I think he was probably happy with the role that he's got there right now in Toronto. He knows he's the number 2 guy, and you're going to get paid in a pretty good fashion. And again, one hit and you're back in. So, like I say, there probably is a better opportunity for our buckle there than anybody, really.
Yeah, it's a great debate and a great question you asked earlier, Trey. Any final thoughts on that before we move on? We got to talk Riders and Bombers here yet.
Also, Kevin Glenn is going to be the draft pick for the 10th CFL team.
Oh, 100%. 100%. All right, let's talk Riders here next, and we'll save the Bombers for last, I think. Been pretty quiet for Saskatchewan so far, but a couple key defensive signings. On the defensive side, Mike Rose signed a couple days ago after he was released by the Stampeders in the D-line, and Tavon Campbell is suddenly back from the NFL at defensive back. Offense, a couple of Tommies here. Tommy Stevens and Tommy Neild coming over from Calgary and Toronto. Touchdown Tommy is in Riderville, Adam. How excited are you that he's not going to break a 3rd and 1 for 97 yards against you anymore?
No, I'm thrilled about that. The other thing I don't have to worry about anymore is Shea Patterson's 3rd and 1. Those are always an adventure. But honestly, that's a good signing for the Riders for third string guy. But the real big signing is Tavon Campbell. He is a defensive back. He's a national, I should add as well, because I know that that's marked wrong in our sheet. He went to school in the University of Regina. He played for Jacksonville. He played for the LA Rams, I believe it was. Just a huge, huge signing for the Saskatchewan Rough Riders to get him back. It really shores up a big spot in that defensive back spot. That's why you see some guys being expendable. Again, Amari Henderson, didn't think he was going to re-sign anyways, to be honest with you, with the Riders, especially seeing as probably Kenny Lawler probably beat him to another spot somewhere in Saskatchewan afterwards. But
I'm surprised he got on the plane home with the team.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I think he actually walked. He might still be walking. We don't know. The Riders have filled a lot of their spots that they really need to fill. There's some spots, of course, you're going to see a lot of subtractions in this. Philip Blake, for example, just age, I think, is going to be the issue there. I can't believe they aren't even thinking about re-signing him, I hope. But they need some help on the offensive line. The defensive line, they've signed a few pieces in there. Mike Rose was the big one there that I would say is probably going to take one of the spots. Micah Johnson really does need to be re-signed. He was still a beast last year, even though the age is getting up there at 36. They still got some re-signings to do. No question about it. I hope that they get them all done. But again, they're signing the players that they really want first. The wide receiver core still looks pretty good for Saskatchewan. I would like to see them sign somebody there. I just because I want to see a good, real solid American offense or wide receiver. But offensive line, I mean, we could sign 50 of those and probably 49 of them will get injured. That's kind of tradition with Saskatchewan. A quarterback, we pretty much got what we want, I think. Running back will be a little bit interesting, I think, because you got Frankie Hickson. I mean, he's probably the odd man out. Armstead is re-signed, so that's not a big issue. Riders know what they're doing. I think they've got pretty much their pieces. Just need to finish it up now.
No, yeah, I agree. One of the biggest issues I felt with Saskatchewan last year, because I was pretty high on them, was damn penalties. And I think that one thing they got to do is shore up, get that core together, which they're doing a pretty good job for. They've added some experience in a defensive back that played in the NFL. Tommy Neal's a good backup Canadian for Shake and Bake, who does get injured a lot. And you got Tommy Stevens, so that third and inches shouldn't be an issue anymore. A lot of not re-signed, but like Adam said, a lot of guys kind of over 30, or a couple younger guys, Picton, Stearns, Mario Elford, guys like that who could be back, but maybe you're just waiting and seeing how the contract layout. Marcus Sales is unsigned on the guy. He has been good, but he also gets burnt. But I feel like that's every DB. They have a good game and then they have a bad game. There's definitely some pieces in Saskatchewan that I'd like to see. But yeah, the main parts, they got a quarterback, they got running backs, they got some good receivers. Their defense is mostly intact, and as long as they get Mario Alford back, they have their return guy that could also hopefully get them on the other side of the field. And Brandon brought up Wayne Ruby Jr. Adam, you know anything about that guy?
He's a signing from the U.S. I'll be honest. I watched this tape. He looked amazing. I think he's going to be a big signing until, training camp happens. You know what? We're just going to say we're living in the Wayne Ruby Jr. era right now. And if he makes the team, I'll be excited. But you know what? I've been disappointed on guys that they sign and then don't end up keeping. So you know what? Until I see him actually in a Rider uniform and on game one of the season, then I'll be real excited about it. But yeah, you know what? There's lots of good signings that the Riders have made this offseason that I've seen. Some ACC guys, some Div 1 guys, they look great, but every team has those signings. Again, this is where Brandon from our NCAA podcast would be a great guy to talk to, because he would know these like the back of his hand. Brandon Sanders, I believe it is. Right?
Yep.
Brandon would know these immediately and be like, oh my gosh, these are amazing. But you know what? They all don't pan out in the NFL or in the CFL or in the AFL or in the XFL. So you know what? Until I see these guys make a full training camp, remember, in Saskatchewan, we've always had the Terrence Nunn Award, the guy that can play the best in training camp and not make the team. So you know what? Honestly, there's a training camp, and some of these guys are just coming in for the training camp. So I'm excited, but you know what? We'll see what happens with Wayne Ruby Jr.
Yeah, my final thought on the Riders here is I'm surprised they haven't done more. With the negotiation window opening, and I know there's still a week till free agency, but you would expect to hear them more pending perhaps deals, given how many pieces they aren't re-signing or haven't re-signed yet at this point, that I thought they'd be more active in the news, especially after last year when they were, I think, probably the biggest winners on the opening day of free agency last year. That I would expect them to be more active, and maybe more of that's coming. But I do like some of those pieces we've talked about that they've added thus far. And finally, let's move on to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, because we don't talk enough about them on the podcast here today. So let's talk about the Bombers. And they've lost a number of pieces for sure, most of them to Hamilton. Let's start with the subtractions, I guess. Fullback Bailey Feltmate retired, so congrats to him on his career and all the best to him and whatever is next. Over to the Ticats, we already talked about Lawler, Wolatarski, Josh Johnson, Liam Dobson, Taiwan Garbett, all going over to Hamilton. Celestin Haba going to the Argos, Ali Fayad going to the Elks, and Tyrell Ford, the big loss there to the Elks. We've, of course, talked about Adam Bighill not coming back to Winnipeg as a notable thing as well. But pieces they've brought in, Peyton Logan confirmed to be signing rumored to be signing a 2-year deal with the Bombers. I like that. Reggie White Jr. from the Montreal Alouettes at wide receiver. Gavin Cobb from the Elks at wide receiver. A couple of, I think, interesting receiver additions there. And Eric Lofton re-signing on the offensive line, and then Josh Haggerty at defensive back from the Elks. Trey, what do you think of what Winnipeg's won and lost here so far?
I'm kind of confused. They added pieces that I didn't think they would add. They got 2 receivers and a running back, which, I guess money isn't there, but I'm actually you lost about 2 or 3 receivers and a running back. You know what I mean? I'm not saying Peyton Logan isn't great, but I almost would have just kept Augustine with the Canadian. Is Logan? No, yeah, exactly. With the Canadian passport. It's impossible, but again, would you not have just kept Wolatarski over Gavin Cobb? They're 2 years difference in age. Yeah, I don't know. Some of these signings are just a little weird to me, but because again, they're just pretty much the guys that you just lost. But I'm not too surprised in losing a guy like Lawler. I didn't think we'd be able to retain him and Schoen for another go around. Kind of surprised about Liam Dobson. I thought that maybe the Bombers would be higher on keeping that O-line. It did play okay at times near the end. And same with Garbutt. I thought the defensive line, but again, they kept Jefferson and Jake Thomas. So I guess there's not lots of room on that D-line. So very weird. And Tyrell Ford, I get it. Go play with your brother, but that was a guy that I think break the salary cap for and do whatever you can do to keep him in Winnipeg. That one's the biggest knife in my heart, honestly, as a Blue Bomber fan. But yeah, weird signings. They did more than you would have thought. I was expecting these subtractions, and then they went and made some weird additions. Not weird, but just additions I didn't think they would, like Peyton Logan and Reggie White. That was kind of out of right field today. And Gavin Cobb's not bad, a Manitoba kid. So kind of interested in how that will go.
Yeah, I like Cobb as the Canadian depth behind Dembski and Corsi. As we talked last week about losing Wolatarski and what happens if one of these guys goes down, who's the depth. I think Cobb fills that really well. I think Reggie White Jr. is an interesting receiver. He looked really good when he started in Montreal. He had an injury and I feel like missed a lot of time due to injury and then maybe came back. I don't know if it was late last year or the year before. Had some good games, but hasn't consistently looked quite the same that I thought he was going to take that next step. So I think he kind of joins as that depth receiver, but I would very much say it's a step back from Kenny Lawler, who they've lost, or Antari Wilson, who they've lost. Dylan Mitchell already being brought in earlier was maybe a replacement for one of those two at least. And Peyton Logan, I love the addition of Peyton Logan for the return game mostly is where that addition comes in because the Bombers' return game sucked last year. It was not very good at all. And Logan is a guy who has burned the Bombers many times, so I'm excited to see him in the uniform. I'm also excited to see how he rotates into the offense because I think Calgary's run game was arguably most effective when you had Mills and Logan both involved in different ways. Which leads me into the news that we came out today, which is the Bombers finally have an offensive coordinator. They did it. They finally made that decision, and it was running back coach Jason Hogan gets the promotion with former Elks head coach Jarius Jackson brought in to be the quarterback coach in Edmonton. Before we get Adam's thoughts, I'll go back to you, Trey, as a Bomber fan on what do you think of the offensive coordinator choice?
I thought it was going to happen at this point. I think they would have brought someone new in. I figured it was going to be a promotion within. I'm actually more interested in Jarius Jackson coming in as the running back or quarterbacks coach because, again, he was just a head coach. There was some, I thought, well, the Charlie in the Discord thought, why not make him the OC? But I guess they went with went with the inside guy first and gave Jarius Jackson another spot. So very interesting. I want to know how that works because I thought Edmonton got a little. Edmonton wasn't terrible under Jackson, were they?
No.
They got a little better, I thought. So I think that's a big addition, and I wonder how much his input on this offense too, along with the guy who's now getting the reins. And hopefully, it's just not Buck Pierce 2.0. That's all.
Adam?
I think the signing is okay. I think Jarius Jackson will do something for that running back game in Winnipeg. I mean, they're going to only have one Canadian running back this year instead of two, so that'll be interesting. Especially if you got Tommy's if you've got your guy in there for Peyton Logan for running, it'll be interesting to see what happens in there. But if I'm Winnipeg, if I'm the offensive coordinator, I'm going to need some help maybe in the wide receiving spot. This has been a while since Winnipeg's had a little bit of a thing for wide receivers kind of going missing. Most of them always stick around, but you got Nick Dembski, you got Dylan Mitchell, which is pretty good, and you got Dalton Schoen. So you got your top three guys, I guess. After that, besides, again, Keurig Wheatfall, who's a pretty good running back, or a good wide receiver, there's not really a whole lot of depth there.
Reggie Smith Jr.?
Reggie White. I have Reggie White Jr. I picture him slotting in as that Rasheed Bailey type role into the offense, right? Where he's like that number 3, 4-ish receiver, and I think that's a role that suits him well.
Okay.
I'm actually not too surprised about the receiver depth. I'm actually kind of happy with the couple pieces they brought in, considering what they left. Yeah, I think the team would be better with Waller, Schoen, Dembski, even Waller-Tarski. If they kept everybody, I think that off receiving core is a lot better than what they have. But I think all said and done, I think Caleros has no excuses not to get the ball down the field with Oliveira standing next to him and this receiving core bearing catastrophic injuries. So I think, again, there's other pieces I think they need to improve on. I think I want to see a little bit more on the old line after losing Dobson and a little bit more on the defense, because sometimes that defense, that bend not break defense, it's going to snap at some point, right? So,
yeah,
especially with no crowd.
Yeah, for sure. The offensive line needs to improve a little bit. I mean, practically right now, you got Neufeld, you got Stanley Bryant, you've got Kolanowski, I guess. I'm not sure if he's in your center in there or where he is. Yeah. That's pretty much your big depth. You got a little bit of depth there, but I mean, not a lot that's been playing, right? Ontario Wilson as well could come back, I guess, as a wide receiver for them as well. If he's cut in the NFL, I would imagine you will see him sometime, possibly later on in the season. It'll be also interesting to see with the guys that are still available there for Winnipeg. If you take a look in there, some of the other guys that are available that you could be taking are losing. Brandon Alexander would be a big one, I think, especially that you lost Tyrell Ford already in Winnipeg. I think you lose Alexander. That could be a really different defensive backfield. The other one also is in there. I was going to say linebacker, but then it dawned on me they've got a perfectly great linebacker already signed up. Sorry, I can't remember. Was Hallich, I think, was the name? Or was it somebody else that I was thinking of?
Who's in at linebacker now? Are you talking about the subtraction of Big Hill and who's?
Well, the subtraction of Big. You lost Big Hill and there was another guy in there, Cole, that probably may not come back. But there was somebody else in there that was a great.
Tony Jones is the mainstay, and then Jonathan Jones, the guy they recently signed from the Argos.
Oh, okay, yeah. So Tony Jones will be perfectly fine there. And Jones, like, again, you got too many Joneses, but that's a different story for another day. Other than that, though, it'll be interesting to see where the other one also is. I'm sure Chris Trevler will get signed as a running back somewhere in the league. I don't know where yet. He's got to get a running back job somewhere. Maybe in Winnipeg. That'd be fun.
Yeah, I forgot to mention James Vaughters signed by the Bombers on the defensive line before as well. And that's one thing where I wonder, like I was saying about Montreal, I wonder if they try to overcorrect their inability to stop the run last year. Winnipeg struggled to stop the run last year as well. They also hardly got any pressure on the quarterback. Now their defense was still stellar at keeping points off the board, but is that something where they didn't get the job done at the end of the day? They try to overcorrect, maybe get a little more pressure on the quarterback. Is Vaughters enough? Do they still go out there for a defensive line? And that I could see them being a little active in that market potentially here as well, especially if they're losing Garbutt and Haba, who have been rotating in over the last little while, and Miles Fox being a free agent there as well. So, well, I guess we'll see what they do yet going forward. Any other thoughts here on the Bombers, or should we get into wrapping things up here, guys?
I think we've covered pretty much all these teams here. It'll be very interesting after free agency where we mark these teams 1 through 9. There could be some real big surprises coming up. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
I can't believe we got through this all in an hour and 40 minutes. Like that, given our runtime is usually between like 1:30 and 1:40, and I know we got to do the wrap up yet. I'd say that's pretty darn good given the amount of information we have to cover compared to normally we just fill it with random jokes and thoughts and tangents that lead us to where we want to go. But let's start wrapping it up. And let's once again talk about Free Agent Frenzy 2025, 1 week from today, Tuesday, February 11th, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Central Time. We will be live for 8 hours of live coverage and analysis of the opening of CFL Free Agency. And if you're asking yourself, well, you just kind of went through everything right now, well, what are you going to do? Is it going to be the exact same thing? No, it won't. Necessarily, because we have a ton of guests joining us as well. So you hear a little bit from us, then the whole panel here once in a while throughout the show. But for the most part, we'll be bringing in guests from different teams and different folks around the country and not just the Canadian. I think we have some from other country as well, maybe. I can't remember who the exact guest list is off the top of my head, but we've got, a full slew of guest coverage on each team throughout the day. So you'll get to hear what your team has done, what's become official on the opening day of free agency. We will have our fancy free agent tracker up and running to show on screen as well. I'm finishing programming that and getting that all set up once again this year. And we're doing this all to raise money for CFL Fans Fight Cancer. So anything you can do to help us spread the word, share links to the show, share our social media posts, tell your friends, tell your non-friends, tell your enemies even. Maybe they won't be your enemies after you tell them to check this out and see how good it is. It's possible. And then donate to CFL Fans Fight Cancer and help us raise money for an excellent cause. 1 week from today, join us on the very platforms where you're watching this. If you're watching this, and if you usually listen to the audio feed, subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/@CFCountdownPod or on Facebook.com/CFCountdownPod. You can find us there as well. We are on Twitter or X and on Blue Sky at CF Countdown Pod as well. You can find us there also and see everything we've got going on for the podcast, all the promotional stuff we're doing right now. And we'll probably be active on the social media feeds throughout the Free Agent Frenzy as well. So you can find all of those things. Guys, where can people find everything you're doing these days? Trey, you hit a milestone with the horse racing site this week.
Yeah, I hit 2,000 views, man. I was pretty excited. Thanks for that. Your couple views you gave me last week definitely helped it, and it was great. So yeah, that's you want to learn about harness racing in Western Canada, that's the westernpacer.ca. You can find me on the X at TreyMBHarness. Yeah, that's all I got. Adam, man, what's going on in Saskatchewan these days, man? Where can people find you when you're not being the voice of the Theodore Buffs?
Well, when I'm not the voice of the Theodore Buffs, which hasn't been very often lately, well, hey, we're going in the playoffs right away, and we got to go take out the Manitoba team again, just because, that's what we do, is we always take out the Manitobans. Anyways, you can find me at Adam Stewart 1 over at the X. You can find me on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. They got me on YouTube there as well. You can find me anywhere. Just type my name in. You'll probably find me somewhere. Or Farmer in Saskatchewan, whatever you want to do. Yeah, lots of stuff going on this week, but mainly I've been dealing with cattle, and yeah, that's very interesting. They don't seem to be as interested in the Free Agent Frenzy, but trying to convince them to come on for an interview. But we'll work on them. We'll see what we can do. We may have a live feed from the cattle barn. We'll see what happens that day. The big thing is you got to watch to find out. So yeah, do the big things. Make sure you're sharing it. Make sure you're getting this out as far as we can. We want to see people from all over the country and maybe even from that other country down south. Who knows?
No, I've got a brilliant idea for next week, and I could save this for our production meeting, but I'm just going to do it live on air. To encourage the donations, Adam, how about we auction off some of the cows?
Do you know what those are worth right now? Back in the day, yeah, that would have been great. I probably would have sent a few, but no, not anymore. I'm sorry, but I'm a little cheap that way.
Dude, after the guys already spent money advertising for us on Facebook, let's get rid of thousands of dollars worth of cattle.
I mean, average calf sells for $3,000 a piece. Yeah, sure. Here, Trey, I'll give those away for sure.
Oh, there we go.
That's great. Come on, man.
Come on. Where's the dedication?
Oh yeah.
Oh, ruthless.
I'm just kidding.
On a side note, should we do our NFL picks too here before we sign off? Even though
That's a game happening. I'm taking the Kansas City Chiefs. I'll say I'm going to keep picking them till they lose.
I'm taking the referees, so that means it's against the Kansas City Chiefs. So,
oh man,
I want to take Philly. I really want to take Philly so bad.
My uncle's a big Philly guy, so I'll take the Eagles for him. But I can't. I don't know. Yeah, I'll take the Eagles. I think Saquon will be the difference if we're going to spend a minute on it. I think if they hand him the ball properly and they use him right, it should be a big difference. If they don't and they play like the Bombers with giving Oliveira the ball in the finals, then yes, it'll be all Kansas City. So,
well, games this Sunday. We'll see how it plays out. And then the NFL is done for the year. UFL starting up soon, which is perfect transition to mention the Alternative Football Network we're a part of. Check out the at the official AFN on X or alternativefootballnetwork.com. Lots of great shows from around the Alternative Football Network. Cover a lot of coverage of the UFL and stuff going on there, so you can check that out. Also check out the other great shows from around the Canadian Football Podcast Network at CF Pod Network on Twitter. You may see some familiar faces from there show up on Free Agent Frenzy next week, which, to answer this question in the chat, yes, 9 a.m. Central next week at 8 straight hours of fun coverage of Free Agent Frenzy. Check out the Canadian Football Countdown Discord community. Link is in the episode description. Free to join us over there and continue the chatter and fun between episodes. And whatever podcast platform you're listening on, we appreciate it if you do all the fun things such as like, comment, subscribe, rate, review, share the show with your friends. Help us grow the show. We always appreciate that. On behalf of Trey and Adam, I'm Ryan saying thank you for listening. Take care. Have a good one. Bye.